Hey guys, it's RipChip. Today we're going to be making a video about the new next-gen N64 controller as it's being advertised on Kickstarter. It's currently met its goal for fundraising, which is pretty cool, and it's a controller made by a group called Retro Fighters. So the reason I'm making a video about this is because the N64 has a major problem in its longevity with its controller, and it's not because of like the buttons or anything. Those are fine. I've had no issues with that whatsoever. The biggest problem, of course, is the analog stick, which, if anyone's owned an N64, has probably burned through a few of their controllers just because of that alone. Along with that, the N64 controller's always had kind of a really awkward design with its three handles, and there have been a number of attempts by third parties to make controllers that accommodate for that, and some of them work out okay, but for the most part, most third-party controllers for the N64 may fit the bill for the, escaping of the three-handle design, but as far as quality-wise goes, they're questionable. So I'm looking at this new controller that's being designed for it, and I have to say I'm pretty excited for it. It looks pretty interesting. I honestly do not have the highest opinion of the N64 like a lot of people who grew up in the 90s do. As a matter of fact, I'm eager to point out all the flaws of the console and some of its weaker points, but regardless of that, I still like a lot of the games for the console, and it would be nice to have some extended time with them, and it's also cool to see a new controller that actually handles this, dilemma of the controller design. So some key things that I find interesting and do want to mention are, for one, the shoulder design for the buttons, including the Z button on the shoulder instead of on the back side of the controller, which I think is great. Definitely handles the whole idea of making a more modern two-handle controller very well by putting it there. So I think that handles that idea really well. Along with that, they also say they wanted to have bigger C buttons for things like fighting games, which I, again, think is cool, but the only problem with that is just the fact that the N64 doesn't exactly have a large library of fighting games for it anyways. I mean, I could probably count on one hand the amount of fighting games I've actually played on the N64, at least when you compare it to other consoles like the Sega, any Sega console, or the PlayStation 1 even. But I still think it's a cool feature, and the increased size for the C buttons I think is still a pretty nice addition. The other major thing I want to mention is the analog stick, because this is the thing that's going to either make or break this controller for me. As I mentioned earlier, the N64, or the base controller for it anyways, the biggest problem I have with it is the analog stick and how incredibly crummy it is and easy it is for it to break. And there have been other things like the Steel Stick project to try and make up for the fragile nature of the N64 controller, so it's kind of cool to see that. But this is using an entirely different stick, which is designed like a modern analog stick, so my only concern for that is a lot of times when I see other analog sticks that are not native N64 sticks, while they might seem like they would work well or really comfortable, they generally have a problem with things like dead zones and just input range, which I really hope isn't going to be a problem. I really want this to have N64 accurate inputs, and as long as it feels good and has a better, design than the original, as far as what parts it's made of, that'll be good. But like I've said, I always have to approach analog sticks that are not the original N64 one with skepticism when it comes to N64 controllers in the past, so hopefully this one feels a lot better. And the other reason I also question that out of concern is just because of the cost. They say they want to sell these things for about $20 each, which is awesome to have it at that price range, but I'm really hoping that it has a quality build that's worth, the money. Because I have paid similar prices to other controllers that have just not felt very good. Regardless of all this, I'm really curious to see how this thing turns out. I'm curious to see how certain N64 games play with this controller, because like I said, as far as ergonomic design goes, it looks really nice, and having a two-handled N64 controller would be cool, as well as another controller to increase the longevity of N64 gameplay. So I'm kind of curious to see how it turns out. Maybe I'll pick one up in the future when it's released officially. For right now, the goal has actually been met on Kickstarter, so I'm curious to see what that brings. And yeah, maybe this could be another suitable N64 controller alongside the Steel Stick replacement project that's going on, which I might make another video about that at some point. I always find this kind of thing interesting to talk about. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what your thoughts are on this controller if you're packing it, any possible concerns you might be worried about, like I mentioned. And yeah, hopefully we'll see more content like this soon. I'm RipChip, thanks for watching.